Well, Alex, I think your theory sounds very plausible. I found it interesting that you spoke of introverted thinking as being a more subjective function than extroverted thinking, just because it is stereotypical to refer to the thinking function as being objective, as being detached reasoning. But it's very true because, at least it's somewhat true, because our introverted functions are going to rely heavily on our processing. They're very intensive. It's like the difference between something that is quickly made through some sort of rote process, gets done out very quickly, and it's very standardized, like factory work and so on, versus something that is personally handcrafted. And what I mean by that is that the materials that go in can be very much the same, and yet the amount of energy that is applied to refine, to really balance, to get everything just right is going to be different in the case of something that's made by hand. I mean, with care. And that's very much the difference, I think, between introverted functions and extroverted functions, because they really are heavy processing functions. There's a lot of personal involvement there. Anyway, there's so much you brought up in your talk that I'm kind of bouncing around lots of these different ideas in my head and having difficulty narrowing down on particular ones. You brought up a very legitimate point about complementary relationships, and that is that communication it can be problematic, especially when we're not at our best in using our dominant and auxiliary functions. Very much so. There is a tendency to talk past each other, I think, in those cases. And with introverted functions, the danger when we're not using our function at our best, I suppose, is that it becomes entirely just an artificial construct in our head. And if it turns out to be wonderful on paper but completely useless in practice, there's something wrong, but we don't necessarily we don't discard it just because of that. We tend to be very focused on how beautiful this theory, this idea, this concept is that we've formed and polished and balanced, and everything is symmetrical, everything is just wonderful. And it's hard for us to let that go, or maybe we shouldn't even let that go. But just because somebody say, well, that doesn't work, well, then we say, well, there must be a way it must work. There's so much beauty to it, that intellectual beauty to it, that there must be some sort of truth to it. And I think actually we're right in some degree that there is some aspect of there's an aspect of beauty. And that's not the word that would normally be used, but there's an aspect of beauty when it comes to truths. And yes, I believe in the existence of truth. I mean, truth is simply being a reasonable representation of reality. And it's obviously an intellectual representation. And it's not going to be perfect, but it can grow in perfection insofar as it can grow closer and closer towards what is the case in reality. It's an approximation anyway. But with things that are true, there is an intellectual beauty to it, but the problem is that not everything that is intellectually beautiful is true, and not everything that is true will seem to our intellect, certainly at initial stages, as beautiful. So there is a real sound impulse there, and yet it can lead us astray. But I'm probably speaking in terms that aren't traditional for thinking types. I guess I should maybe clarify too. What do I mean by beauty? I would, on an intellectual level, I would say beauty is found in plausibility, in consistency. It is found in how it is interconnected and how it is organic, in the sense that one thing, well, it kind of overlaps with what I'm saying, interconnected, but when something's organic, it grows. grows from a seed, moves up, you know, the branches, stem, everything works together and everything is connected. And you can't just chop off the roots and have the tree be fine. You chop off the roots, the tree dies. You can take the same tree, chop off all the branches. It's going to be struggling. It's going to send out little shoots and try to get new branches out there because it needs to get the energy from photosynthesis. And that's the case, and I lost my train of thought. That is the case when it comes to a good understanding of reality, because things are very much connected. There is oftentimes an organic relationship between things in this world, because this world is fundamentally an organic world. I mean, the world that we live in as human beings grew. And you can even extend that even to the geological processes that happen on a universal scale, a cosmic scale, that even resulted in our universe existing. One thing led to another. It's the whole situation of cause and effect, and how things are also influenced by other things. And so there is part of beauty, intellectual beauty, is this organic nature of what is true. And so what is reality, that is, and so if our truth it does not show that sort of organicness, it's a nice model, and there can be lots of good things about it, but it doesn't have that deeper beauty that is really a hallmark of a greater understanding of truth. And I'm really getting off topic here, I guess. Typical introverted feeling and extroverted intuition. Running off with an idea down the rabbit holes and not respecting the fences that get put up. That it can be the frustration, I think, with dealing with inverted types, which I used to say complementary types that have inverted functions compared to each other, is that where one type will see things as being very kind of defined, clear-cut. Here's the borders, here's the fences, and there is order, and everything is structured. The other type will see everything is wide open, and they'll jump those fences, and they will ignore your order. And it doesn't matter what type you are, every type has a combination of these ordered, very defined, very set sort of ways of dealing with reality. And then we have these loose, free, liberated sort of ways of dealing with reality. And we need that combination. Because just one by itself is going to be sterile. It's going to be dead. It's not going to work. I mean, for example, I'm speaking of an overly structured sort of function. It's just not going to give you flexibility to adapt, to respond to changing information, changing situations, changing experiences of this reality. Whereas a completely let's just flow with it improvisatory approach is going to have problems sometimes dealing with efficiency, with getting things done, with regularity, with just the situations where order is preferable, where it is good to have certain things defined. And also, not only that, it also helps with communication when things are understood on a common level, where things are not being constantly reinvented. It's easier to communicate. It's easier to function with other people. And I see also a very distinct connection on this insofar as it is my impression that introverted functions tend to be... Oh, actually, I take that back. Take that back. I didn't say it out loud, but I'm already taking it back because I see a problem with what I was going to say. And let me rephrase it. I see in people, with their combination of their one introverted function, one extroverted function, however it's organized, that there will always be, one of those functions will be one of these liberated, free, kind of just free-ranging, roaming, open way of interpreting things, and then the other one will tend to be the one that sets the order, sets the boundaries, sets the limits. It provides the steel that is necessary for any sort of building that's going to stand tall, in a city, speaking metaphorically. And we need that. because if we only had one, like I said, we only had one or the other, we're not going to be able to function. We need that. But what is peculiar when you're dealing with a complementary type is that, for example, ENFJ and INFP. INFP, our feelings are handled internally, and it's a very structured world. There is a great deal of conformity that we require in ourselves and our feelings insofar as what is dearest to us, our convictions, our beliefs, our values, our loved ones. We expect our behavior, our words to be in conformity with that. And so everything has to get in line. Everything is ordered, structured. It is your fenced-in, wonderful, curated garden. That's introverted feeling. Extroverted feeling, on the other hand, it plays loosey-goosey from an INFP's perspective with the self, with what defines the self, with what is important to me, with what is my reaction to things on a personal level, on a subjective level. And it has that liberating effect. It can be much more adaptable, flexible in how it relates on a feeling level with the world. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I mean that's one example that with INFP, the introverted feeling is going to be the very by-the-book kind of ordered, very solid, very crystallized. Whereas in ENFJ, with extroverted feeling, it's going to be very loose, very flexible, and they love that freedom, and we love the order and the consistency within us. Now we get on to the second function. With I have extroverted intuition, ENFJ has introverted intuition. You have exactly an opposite situation, because extroverted intuition loves to jump borders. It loves to get outside of the box. It doesn't like the box very much at all, unless it turns the box inside out and turns it into something else, or draws a little spaceship on it, flies away, or makes it a transmogrifier. It loves to gallop in the wilderness, and it's an explorer. It's very much this stereotypical person who is filled with awe and seeks out moments that inspire awe. That is extroverted intuition. They really just love the uncertainty, the drama, the adventure. And I guess I'm kind of all poetical about it. Maybe that's not helpful, but and so that's extroverted intuition. When it processes things, it doesn't come with, oh, here's the solution. No, it's like, here's a bunch of possibilities. There could be this, there could be that, there could be this, there could be that. And meanwhile, introverted intuition is very much the opposite. Introverted intuition, it wants to take in this data, and it's going to process it, and it's going to come to the right answer, or come into at least the most likely answer. It's wants to have things come to a head. It's not about adventure, and it's not about the welcoming uncertainty and seeing where it takes you. It's very much almost like the opposite. It wants to reduce the uncertainty. It wants to make things secure, make things safe, make things solid and certain. And so now, don't get me wrong, though. I definitely don't get me wrong. In these cases, especially with introverted and extroverted intuition, there is, I believe, an element of play that is very strong in them. And that doesn't matter. You can be introverted intuition, and you're working towards your solution. And yet there will be, at certain stages, there will be a playfulness about it. There can be real fun about it. And same thing, extroverted intuition. We're juggling all these different things, and we're finding, oh, this connects to this, and this connects to that, and we're just playing it all wild and crazy. And there's definitely, playfulness and fun with that. I almost think maybe if there's a difference, it is where the play comes into play, and that's kind of a confusing way to phrase it. But where the playfulness reigns. With extroverted intuition, Now this is actually something I have not thought of, so I can't give you a quick spit out on this. But with extroverted intuition, I think it it really starts and ends with playfulness, and maybe gets bogged down in the middle. And I think maybe with introverted intuition, and this is just a wild guess, just an intuition of my own, is maybe it actually is filled with play, but at the start and the end is not so playful. It kind of wants to tie it up into a neat little ribbon and a bow, whereas the extrovert intuition just wants things to explode like a Jackson Pollock painting on the canvas. It's expressing... anyway, I'm rambling on. I've probably gone on way too long at this point, and I didn't really even get into some of the things I wanted to talk about the problems in communication and so on. But I think I will close in saying that the communication problems can be worked out. It does require a greater maturity than would automatically be the case for any personality type. When you're dealing with the complementary type, you really need to be more self-aware, and you also need to be more patient and understanding, and being willing to take the extra step, go the extra mile, to try to make obvious what is already clear to you, but it won't necessarily be clear to somebody who has a different perspective than you. And also being humble enough sometimes to ask, I don't understand what you're saying. Could you try to explain this in a different way, or could you put it? This is how I understand what you're saying. Am I right, or where am I getting this wrong? It takes humility, which I would define as self-honesty and self-knowledge that is accurate, that is based in truth, not skewed so you have an overinflated idea of yourself, and not like, oh, I'm horrible, horrible, horrible. It is just right. It's having a good knowledge of yourself, a good self-awareness, and not only that, of yourself in relation to others, to what else that exists, in relation to reality. That's humility, and that's what's needed to deal with a complementary type. Or at least that's probably the best way to deal with it. And that's why it requires maturity, because we struggle with that sort of awareness, with that sort of acceptance of who we are and what our limits are, and seeing our strengths and weaknesses. And it's only when we can be honest with ourselves about those things that we can really have a flourishing and just fantastic relationship with a complementary type. But if we are willing to go that extra step, I think it is completely worth it, because it just raises your world to a whole different level. At least it can potentially do that. Anyway, question. Oh, geez. Well, I think maybe it's time for us to sum up this particular duologue that we've had, this conversation. So, I would encourage you, if there's anything that I've said that you want to follow up on, by all means follow that up. But then also try to include some sort of thing that you would consider probably the most important aspect of this whole dynamic of complementary types. What is something that people really need to know to let these relationships be a positive and beneficial and good aspect in their life. So thank you, Alex.